She opened her mouth, and the world remembered how to hope. A single voice, thin, trembling, impossible to forget, carried songs into cinema halls and into living rooms. To millions, she was Dorothy, a girl in gingham, an emblem of wonder, of longing, of innocence made incandescent by celluloid. The cameras craved that smile. The press framed that face. The audience took it as gift. But the image told only half the story. Behind the frame, behind the lacquered light and the applause, a quieter production was running. Hours trimmed into mileage. Energy measured in pills. A body scheduled like a set piece. The studio did not merely shape a star, it engineered endurance. What it could not coax from sleep or diet, it supplied in capsules. Pep pills for the long takes, sleeping tablets for the brief recoveries.
Her brightness became a commodity, her exhaustion an operational problem to be solved. The same hands that smoothed her hair for the camera also handed her substances that kept her on cue. Over years, the practice hardened into routine, and routine became dependency. This was not the private fall of a single woman. It was a pattern, a system that turned vulnerability into a supply chain, and then called the outcome tragic. This film begins there, with a smile that everyone knows and a quiet ledger that no one wanted to balance. It asks a simple, cold question. When an industry treats talent like a machine, who takes responsibility when the machine breaks?
Before Hollywood claimed her, she was Frances Gumm, a child who sang not because someone ordered it, but because it was the only language her tiny heart knew. Her parents toured the vaudeville circuits. Applause was the family's currency, and little Frances quickly became its brightest coin. But with talent came pressure, and with pressure came the earliest cracks. When MGM discovered her at just 13, they didn't see a child. They saw potential profit. They saw a voice powerful enough to build franchises. They saw a face that could be adjusted, shaped, perfected. And from the moment she signed her contract, the adjustments began. Executives told her she wasn't pretty enough. Her face was too round, her body too childish, her energy inconsistent.
So the studio handed her a solution. Tiny pills delivered by assistants with soft voices and clinical precision. Take these, they'll help you keep up. Amphetamines to stay awake through 18-hour shooting days. Barbiturates to force her into sleep when her heart refused to slow down. A schedule built like a loop. Stimulation, performance, sedation, repeat. She was a teenager. She was exhausted. But in the studio's eyes, she was improving. The problem wasn't her health. The problem was her humanity. And they considered that optional. Those first pills were not optional, though. They were framed as necessities, as tools, as professional obligations. And a child, desperate to please, did exactly as she was told. That's when the spiral began, one she could never fully escape. By the time Judy stepped into full stardom, the cycle was no longer an emergency measure. It was a system. The studio had built a schedule that no human body could survive naturally, then used pharmaceuticals as the glue that kept her from collapsing. Under the bright banners of MGM, Judy Garland became the face of American optimism. On posters, she sparkled. On screen, she floated. But off-camera, her days were carved into strict, merciless blocks. Wake up from chemically induced sleep, take a stimulant, rehearse, film, take another, smile wider, sing higher, collapse, be sedated, repeat. Doctors on MGM's payroll reassured her, "You need these to maintain your performance." It sounded like care, but it functioned like control. Her meals were restricted, her movements monitored, her relationships discouraged,
Her exhaustion was dismissed as a temperamental phase. And the pills. They became the only constant. As she moved from film to film, Babes in Arms, Meet Me in St. Louis, The Harvey Girls, her energy on screen grew more radiant, even as her body behind the scenes grew frailer. When she couldn't keep pace, the studio didn't question the schedule. They questioned her. She's unreliable. She's emotional. She's difficult. But what MGM labeled instability was simply the cost of survival in a system that pushed her beyond endurance, then punished her for collapsing. Every triumph in her career demanded another withdrawal from her physical and emotional reserves. And with each pill, the line between Judy the performer and Judy the person blurred further, until even she could no longer separate them. She wasn't addicted to a substance. She was addicted to the praise, the approval, the applause that seemed only to come when she was functioning as the studio's perfectly tuned machine.
The momentum that had once lifted her now became the force pulling her down. Years of stimulants and sedatives had carved deep grooves into her life, routines she could no longer escape, even after MGM let her go. The system had built the dependency, but the aftermath was hers alone to survive. Without the studio's rigid structure, Judy found herself drifting. Performances became harder. Her voice remained golden, but her body trembled beneath it. Her moods swung between brilliance and collapse. She missed rehearsals. She arrived late. She fell asleep in dressing rooms. Each failure fed the next. Each disappointment pushed her deeper into the only thing that made the world bearable, the familiar chemical silence of pills. Her marriages fractured under the weight of emotional strain and financial pressure. Debt followed her like a shadow. Public sympathy was inconsistent. Adoration turned quickly into frustration, then cruel judgment. To the world, she had gone from America's sweetheart to a cautionary tale, a label far easier than acknowledging the machinery that had built her collapse.
Still, she fought. She returned to concerts. She delivered performances so raw they moved audiences to tears. But behind the ovations were nights of shaking hands, sleepless despair, and the same pills she once took as a teenager. Now no longer optional, now a cage. By 1969, her body had endured more than it could ever repay. On a quiet June morning in London, Judy Garland, the girl who sang her way into America's heart, died alone from an overdose of barbiturates. Not a dramatic act, not a statement, just a body too tired to continue. The tragedy wasn't the overdose. The tragedy was everything that led to it. A lifetime of being told that her worth was measured only by how brightly she could burn. The world mourned Judy Garland as if she were a comet that burned too brightly, too briefly. But that narrative is a convenient fiction. Comets burn themselves out. Judy was burned by design. The deeper truth is colder, quieter, and far more unsettling. Judy Garland didn't fall apart. She was engineered to function until she broke. The pills that destroyed her weren't an unfortunate habit. They were a studio-approved operating system. In the golden age of Hollywood, the star was never the owner of her own body. The studio was. And Judy was not the only one. Other stars of the era were given pep pills to work longer hours, diet pills to keep impossibly slim, sleeping pills to squeeze rest into schedules that didn't allow it. Executives called it support. Assistants called it a routine. Doctors called it treatment. But in reality, it was control. Control wrapped in medical language, hidden beneath glamour, normalized through repetition. Judy simply became the most visible casualty. The twist is that the tragedy wasn't born in her adulthood, nor in her insecurities, nor even in her fame. It was born in the moment a young girl was told that her natural self, her face, her body, her pace, her humanity, was insufficient. Hollywood didn't just alter her appearance, it rewired her biology, her habits, her emotional responses,
her very capacity to function without chemical intervention. And then, when the machine they created started to malfunction, they labeled her unstable, unreliable, difficult. The industry washed its hands, but the fingerprints of its influence remained all over the wreckage of her life. The real twist is this: Judy Garland's addiction was not a personal failure. It was a corporate invention.
When we remember Judy Garland, we remember the voice that rose above its era, tender, trembling, unmistakably human. We remember Dorothy stepping onto the yellow brick road, a girl searching for a place where she finally belonged. We remember applause that shook concert halls, and a spirit that refused to disappear even as the world tried to reshape her into something she could never truly be. But beneath the legacy lies the bill that Hollywood never paid. The pills meant to help her became the bars of a gilded cage. The studio that built her image also built her undoing. And the world that adored her rarely understood the cost of the smile it demanded. Judy once said, "If I'm a legend, then why am I so lonely?" A line so fragile, it feels like it could collapse under its own truth.
Her life is more than a cautionary tale. It is a reminder of what happens when an industry values performance over people, profit over well-being, and perfection over humanity. In the end, Judy Garland left behind more than films and music. She left a warning, a whisper that still echoes through Hollywood's corridors. Don't let them take pieces of you in exchange for applause. Her story forces us to ask, if the cameras had been kinder, if the system had been human, if the girl behind the curtain had been allowed to rest, would Judy Garland have lived long enough to finally smile for herself?